The wind had a voice that morning, soft and mournful, brushing across the dry plains like an old hand tracing the edges of forgotten memories. The horizon was a pale wash of gold, fragile lights spilling over the jagged silhouettes of distant mesas, each one holding secrets older than the town itself. Dust rose lazily from the soil, curling like smoke from a long-extinguished fire. In the midst of it all stood a homestead, worn by sun and storm, yet stubborn in its claim to the earth beneath. Its timbers creaked softly, groaning in the hush of dawn. Jacob Landon, a man of weathered hands and silent eyes, moved with quiet certainty across his fields. His boots sank into the sun-baked soil with a muted thud, a rhythm he had known all his life. The land had been his companion, his confidant, his anchor in a world that seemed ever ready to sweep him aside. And yet, even as he bent to inspect the stubborn sprouts of late corn, a chill tickled the back of his neck, though the air held no cold. It was then that his shovel struck something that did not belong. Not rock, not root, but a hollow, strange resistance, as if the earth itself had paused in its eternal labor. Jacob knelt, brushing the dirt aside with slow, reverent fingers, and there it lay. A relic, ancient and enigmatic, cradled in the soil like a heart that had slept for centuries. Its surface was carved with symbols that seemed to shift when caught in the morning sun, deep grooves worn smooth by time, yet retaining a fierce, stubborn intent. The wood was dark, almost alive, faint traces of red and ochre fading into its grain. A single feather, brittle and curled, lay at its base, as if offering itself to whoever would dare to claim the artifact. Jacob's breath caught. His hands trembled, not from fear alone, though fear was there, sharp and insistent, but from a kind of awe he had never known. The relic seemed to hum beneath his touch, a soft vibration that traveled through his arms, through his chest, and settled deep in his bones. The land around him was silent in that moment, holding its breath, as if it too were waiting to see what he would do. It was not long before he realized he was not alone. A figure emerged from the shadows of the tree line, a woman, tall and composed, her dark hair catching threads of sunlight, eyes quiet and knowing. She moved with a careful grace, almost like she had been walking toward this moment for decades. "You found it," she said softly, her voice a warm current against the chill in the morning air. There was no accusation, only the gentle weight of recognition. It was not meant to be disturbed lightly. Jacob straightened, brushing dust from his hands, his throat tight. I didn't know." Words felt small, inadequate against the gravity of the artifact between them. The woman stepped closer, eyes tracing the relic as if reading an invisible script. "This belongs to the people who came before," she said. "They will want it back. And yet, the land brought it to you for a reason. Perhaps it is testing you." Jacob swallowed hard, the relic heavy in his hands and heavier in his mind. The wind stirred again, carrying a whisper of something untranslatable, something that belonged to the plains long before his ancestors had tilled the soil. He had grown up on these lands, had learned to coax life from the stubborn earth, yet he had never felt the presence of its past so vividly. The woman, her name, he would later learn, was Ayana, crouched beside him, her fingers brushing the edges of the relic without touching its heart. "It carries stories," she murmured. "Stories of honor, of loss, of survival. You can feel it, can't you?" Jacob nodded, though words failed him. The relic thrummed beneath his fingers, not in sound, but in essence, like the pulse of something alive and eternal. And in that pulse, he felt a connection to a past that had been long silenced, to a people whose lives had been etched into every hill, every valley, every stretch of wind-whipped plain. For a long while, they sat in silence. The morning light grew stronger, painting the relic in hues of amber and bronze. Dust motes swirled between them, caught in the fragile shafts of sun, as if the land itself was stirring, impatient for a choice to be made. The stillness was broken by distant voices, carried on the wind. Figures appeared along the crest of the hill, elders from the local Apache community, their gait deliberate, faces lined with the wisdom and weariness of countless seasons. Their eyes, when they fell upon the relic, held a mixture of sorrow and stern expectation. They were not angry, but the weight of their presence pressed upon Jacob like the first heavy drop of rain before a storm. Iona rose slowly, a quiet command in her posture. "They have come for it," she said, "and what they demand may test you in ways you do not yet understand." Jacob's hands tightened around the relic. He felt the pull of ownership, the sense that the land, and now this object, were pieces of his identity, parts of the legacy he thought he controlled. Yet as he met the eyes of the elders, he understood this was not a possession to be claimed. It was a responsibility, a bridge between generations, a living story that demanded reverence. One of the elders stepped forward, a woman whose hair was silver and whose eyes held the fire of remembered pain. She reached out, palm open but not demanding. "This is not yours," she said. "It has been waiting for those who can honor it, who can listen. Will you listen?" Jacob felt the words settle over him, heavy and luminous. He nodded slowly, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The relic was no longer merely a discovery. It had become a test, a mirror of his own heart. Could he lay aside pride, fear, and habit to act rightly? Could he meet the expectation of voices that had spoken long before his own family had called this land home? The morning deepened, and with it, a tension that was almost tangible, like the charged stillness before a summer storm. Jacob held the relic as if it were a fragile heartbeat. He looked to Iona, who gave a small, approving nod. Encouragement without judgment, guidance without insistence. He understood, then, that his life on this land had changed forever. The relic had arrived not as an ornament of history to be displayed or sold, but as a question, a challenge, a quiet demand for conscience and courage. And as he met the gaze of the elders, he felt something he had long buried, a stirring of humility, a recognition of connection far larger than his own life or land. The wind rose again, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant rain, brushing across the plains in whispers. Jacob took a deep breath, the sun warming his face, and he made a decision that would ripple far beyond this morning. He would listen, he would honor, he would learn. And as he did, a hush fell over the homestead and the fields beyond, as if the land itself were leaning closer, patient and expectant. The first step of a long journey had been taken, though the path was uncertain, fraught with questions that had no easy answers. But in that stillness, in that gentle, trembling awe, Jacob felt the beginning of something enduring, a story unfolding slowly, like a river carving its way through stone, shaping lives with quiet insistence. And so, with the relic cradled reverently, Jacob rose to meet the elders, his heart heavy yet open, ready to step into a tale that had begun long before him and would echo long after. The wind whispered around them, carrying a secret only the land could know, and the plains waited with patient silence, holding their breath for the choice he was about to make. The sun climbed higher, spilling warmth over the plains, but it could not chase away the quiet weight that lingered over the homestead. Jacob moved slowly, carrying the relic with care, feeling its pulse beneath his fingers as if it were not wood and feather, but something alive. Iona walked beside him, her eyes not on the relic, but on him, steady and knowing, like the land itself had chosen her as a guide. "You must understand," she said softly, "it is not the object that matters alone. It is what it carries, the memories, the prayers, the stories of a people who trusted the earth with their lives." Jacob nodded, though understanding came in fragments. He had tilled this soil for decades, had coaxed crops from stubborn clay, and coaxed life from harsh seasons, but he had never felt the land speak like this. The relic was a voice, faint yet insistent, and it spoke of patience, humility, and respect far older than his own ambitions. They arrived at the edge of a small grove, where sage and juniper mingled in a quiet dance with the wind. Here, Iona asked him to set the relic down, and as he did, he noticed the subtle hum that had lingered in his hands seemed to expand, filling the space around them like the land itself exhaling. "This place," Jacob whispered, "it feels alive." Iona smiled faintly. "It has always been, but only those who listen can hear it." They sat on a fallen log, the relic between them, and for a long while they said nothing. The air held a gentle hush, broken only by the distant call of a hawk and the whisper of leaves. In that silence, Jacob began to feel something stir within him, a tentative awareness that the land, the relic, and this quiet woman beside him were threads of story he had yet to understand, but one he was drawn to follow. Iona's voice cut through the quiet like a soft melody. "This relic belonged to the Apache, yes, but it is more than history. It is a promise. Those who held it before trusted it to carry their hopes, their fears, and their courage. It is a bridge." Jacob traced the carvings with his fingers, noting the patterns, swirls and lines that seemed to move when he shifted his gaze, like the story of a river etched into wood. "And they want it back?" he asked, a lump in his throat. "They do," she said, "but it is not taken by force. It must be received, honored. The wrong hands can break it, or worse, themselves." Her eyes met his, steady, unyielding, yet gentle. "Do you understand why it came to you?" He did not fully. But he felt a tug at the roots of something deep inside him, a sense of duty, of connection, of responsibility that stretched far beyond his own needs. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth, and in that moment, the distant voices of the elders rose from the grove. They had arrived quietly, a presence as natural as the trees themselves. Jacob rose, holding the relic carefully, and greeted them with what respect he could summon, aware of how small and mortal he felt in their gaze. One of the elders, a man whose face was lined with years, yet alight with quiet authority, stepped forward. "The land remembers," he said, voice soft but firm. "And so must you. You hold not an object, but a story." Jacob's fingers tightened around the relic. I will listen," he said. The words felt insufficient, but they were all he could offer. For days that followed, the homestead became a place of learning, of quiet teaching. Iona guided Jacob through stories of the land, of the rivers that remembered rain long after it had fallen, of the mountains that held the echoes of ancestors' laughter and tears. She spoke of courage not as boldness, but as patience, of strength not as force, but as the capacity to endure and protect. Jacob listened, sometimes speaking, often silent, absorbing lessons that went beyond language. He watched Iona work, tending herbs, tracing the relic with reverence, listening to the wind as though it whispered secrets only she could translate. He began to see her not merely as a guide, but as a presence that mirrored the land, strong yet yielding, steadfast yet alive with quiet mystery. In these long, quiet hours, bonds began to form. Jacob discovered in himself a capacity for trust, for gentleness, that had lain dormant beneath years of solitude. Iona, in turn, observed his transformation with subtle smiles and quiet nods. There was no rush, no grand gestures, only the slow, unfolding recognition of each other's humanity. But not all eyes watched kindly. In the town, whispers began to ripple through the dusty streets. Some feared the relic, a supposed curse, an omen of misfortune. Others coveted it, seeing only the value of history turn into coin. A man named Harlan, brash and greedy, made no effort to hide his disdain for the notion of respect or understanding. He saw Jacob's hesitation as weakness and plotted quietly, always lurking at the edge of town, waiting for opportunity. Back at the homestead, the elders spoke in low tones of the relic's significance. They explained the ceremonial practices, the way it had been entrusted to their ancestors, and the moral obligations it carried. Each story was a thread, weaving Jacob and Iona into the tapestry of history that had come alive through the relic. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the horizon, Jacob and Iona sat by the fire, the relic resting between them. He watched the flickering flames dance across her face, shadows playing over features that seemed carved from the earth itself, patient, wise, enduring. "Do you feel it too?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. The way it speaks to us. Jacob nodded, tracing a line in the dirt with his finger. I do. I think. I think it's asking me to be better than I am, to see more than I ever have. Ayanna reached out, not touching, but hovering close enough that her presence warmed him. It does not ask. It reveals. You choose what to hear. And so, the days passed, each one a gentle unfolding. Jacob learned to listen to the subtle voices of the plains. The way a hawk's call could signal change, the rustle of sage could carry a warning. He learned to see beyond himself, to recognize that honor and respect could be actions as simple as kneeling in silence or letting a story pass from one generation to another. Through it all, a quiet tension simmered beneath the surface. The relic was not merely a bridge to the past. It was a test of character. Jacob sensed the eyes of the elders upon him, the soft scrutiny of Ayanna, and even the shadow of Harlan's interest. Each step he took in understanding, each act of patience and humility, was a small victory, yet the threat of misstep lingered like distant thunder. Then came the day when Jacob was tending the fields alone, the relic resting nearby under a woven cloth, when he felt a sudden shift in the air. The wind carried a different scent, smoke, dust, and something unplaceable, ancient and insistent. He looked up to see Harlan lingering at the edge of the property, a smirk on his face, eyes glinting with calculation. Jacob's pulse quickened, not with anger, but with an awareness that the trials were not yet over. The relic had drawn him into a story far larger than his own life, and now the world beyond the grove, beyond the homestead, had begun to notice. Ayanna arrived silently, moving beside him like a shadow of reassurance. Do not fear the storms before they come, she said, but do not ignore them either. Together, they returned the relic to the grove, its presence humming softly between them. Jacob felt an unfamiliar steadiness in his chest, a growing courage born not of force, but of understanding. He realized that the path forward would require more than careful hands. It would demand discernment, compassion, and an unwavering respect for those whose stories had been entrusted to him. Night fell with a blanket of stars, and the fire at the homestead cast long shadows across the land. Jacob and Ayanna watched the embers, feeling the pulse of history beneath their feet, aware that the coming days would bring tests of loyalty, courage, and character. Yet in the quiet, among the whispered wisdom of the elders and the gentle rhythm of the plains, a bond had formed, delicate, unspoken, yet as enduring as the earth itself. The relic rested in the center of the grove, a silent sentinel of memory and trust. Jacob felt its weight not as a burden, but as a call to something greater, to honor, to connection, to the slow awakening of the soul. And as the wind stirred once more, carrying the faint scent of rain and sage, Jacob knew that he had begun a journey that would reshape not only his life, but the lives of all who watched and all who had come before. The story had deepened, the threads of trust woven between hero, heroine, and land, and the quiet pulse of anticipation thrummed through every living thing around them. The first tests of patience and understanding had been met, but the world beyond the grove, the whispers of greed, the shadow of Harlan, the expectations of the elders, still waited. And Jacob, for the first time, welcomed the weight of that responsibility, knowing it was a path that would demand his very heart. The days stretched long under the sun, the plains golden and endless, yet the air carried a tension that had not been there before. Jacob felt it in the stiffness of his shoulders, the way his fingers lingered on the relic, as if it were the only thing keeping the world anchored. Harlan's shadow lingered, subtle but persistent, like a chill drifting over warm earth. And the elder's presence, once comforting, now pressed gently, insistently, reminding him that the path he had chosen carried weight far beyond his own heart. Ayanna noticed the change in him. The land tests those who would honor it, she said one evening, her voice carrying the softness of dusk and the wisdom of countless years. They sat beneath the old juniper grove, the relic resting between them on a woven cloth. It is not enough to hold the relic. You must act rightly, even when fear whispers, even when pride beckons. Jacob's eyes lingered on her face, catching the last threads of sunlight. I feel it, he admitted, the weight. And sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to bear it. Her hand hovered near his, a gesture of presence rather than touch. Strength is not the absence of fear, Jacob. It is moving forward with it, and choosing kindness when cruelty is easy. The following morning brought the first true test. Harlan appeared at the edge of the grove, his approach brazen, eyes glinting with greed. "That relic," he said, voice sharp and sneering, "belongs to me. You've no idea what it's worth." Jacob stood, heart pounding, aware that his hands trembled not from fear but from the gravity of choice. He could seize the moment, fight, or surrender. Any act would shape the story to come. But the relic was not a prize. It was a bridge, a trust, and the lessons Ayanna had imparted whispered like the wind through the trees. Act with honor, act with care. Harlan stepped closer, a sneer twisting his face. "Do you think the elders will stop me? Do you think anyone cares about stories over gold?" Jacob inhaled slowly, grounding himself. "It is not yours to take," he said quietly, his voice carrying a calm he did not yet feel. "You do not understand." Harlan laughed, a harsh sound that grated against the soft hum of the grove. He lunged toward the relic, but Jacob moved instinctively, placing himself between Harlan and the artifact. The world narrowed to the pulse beneath his hands, the whisper of wind through the juniper, the quiet authority of Ayanna beside him. He felt the weight of generations in his chest, the silent gaze of elders who had entrusted him with something far greater than land or gold. Ayanna stepped forward, eyes steady. "Harlan," she said, "leave. The relic is not yours to claim." Her voice held a quiet, unyielding power that seemed to ripple through the air, and for a moment, the man hesitated, taken aback by a force he had not anticipated. But Harlan was not easily swayed. "I'll take what I want, and no one will stop me," he spat, though the certainty in his tone wavered as he took in the depth of respect and courage before him. Jacob stood taller, not with arrogance, but with understanding. "Then you take nothing," he said. "Not because you are weak, but because this is not yours to take, and because I will not let it be." Harlan's anger burned, but he realized he could not force the issue here, not with the elders watching and the land itself seeming to lean against him. He retreated with a final sneer, leaving Jacob and Ayanna to the quiet of the grove, their hearts still racing, but steadied by the choices they had made. In the days that followed, Jacob's sense of responsibility deepened. The relic's pulse beneath his hands became a guide, a reminder that courage was measured not in feats of strength, but in moral clarity. He spent long hours walking the fields, speaking softly to the earth, feeling the presence of ancestors in the wind, listening to the subtle murmurs that carried lessons of patience and restraint. Ayanna joined him often, and their companionship blossomed quietly, like a hidden spring forming beneath the desert sands. They shared stories, not grand tales of adventure, but small, tender truths, the loss of a father, the joy of a childhood memory, the fear of failing those who trusted them. Their closeness grew not through dramatic gestures, but through gentle understanding, through the unspoken acknowledgement of shared humanity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the plains in molten amber, Jacob and Ayanna stood before the relic in the grove. The elders had requested a preliminary ceremony, a test of intent and humility, a chance to demonstrate understanding before the relic could truly be returned. Jacob felt his chest tighten. The ritual was simple in action, but heavy in consequence. He was to kneel, to offer water from the river, to whisper acknowledgement to the spirits of the land and the ancestors of the tribe. Each movement demanded sincerity. Each breath was a promise. Ayanna guided him silently, her presence a tether to calm. "Let your heart speak," she whispered. "Let your respect flow through every gesture. Do not rush, do not force. Let be natural." Jacob obeyed, moving slowly, deliberately, feeling the eyes of the elders upon him. The water shimmered in his hands, catching the last light of day. He poured it carefully over the relic, whispering words that had no need for understanding beyond his own heart. And then a subtle shift. The air seemed to thrum, the wind carrying faint whispers that could have been voices, could have been a memory of leaves brushing together centuries ago. Jacob felt a tremor through the soles of his feet, a recognition that this moment, small though it seemed, carried the weight of all who had come before. The elders nodded, their faces serene yet assessing. Jacob rose, heart still pounding, aware that he had passed the first true test, not through confrontation, not through fear, but through understanding, respect, and courage born of humility. That night, as stars blanketed the sky like scattered diamonds, Jacob and Ayanna sat by the fire, the relic resting nearby. Their shoulders brushed lightly, a contact so subtle it might have gone unnoticed, yet carried a warmth neither had expected. "You did well," Ayanna said softly, her voice barely above the crackle of the flames. "You listened when it mattered most." Jacob exhaled slowly. "I feel changed. The land, the relic, I don't know how to explain it. It's like something inside me is waking." Ayanna smiled, the motion slow and luminous in the firelight. "Perhaps it is. Perhaps this story needed you to see more than the land, more than the artifact. Perhaps it needed you to see yourself." Their moment was interrupted by the faintest sound of movement, a shadow slipping through the trees at the edge of the firelight. Harlan had returned, emboldened by the night, thinking the world asleep, thinking he could claim what was not his. But this time, Jacob did not hesitate. He rose, the relic safely nearby, and confronted the threat not with anger, but with the calm of certainty. Harlan sneered, but Jacob's presence, combined with Ayanna's quiet authority, gave pause. The man realized that brute force would avail him nothing here. This was a space of respect, of connection, of something far older and stronger than greed. With a final, frustrated glare, Harlan retreated, leaving Jacob and Ayanna in silence once more. Jacob sank back beside the fire, heart still racing but steadied by a newfound understanding. He realized that courage was not always dramatic. It could be quiet. It could be patient. It could be measured in a single choice, repeated day after day, in alignment with honor, respect, and the gentle guidance of those who knew the weight of history. The elders observed from a distance, their presence a subtle, grounding force. Jacob felt their approval not as judgment, but as recognition. He was learning to move in the world as it had always been meant to be approached, with humility, with awareness, with open heart. In that quiet night, under the tapestry of stars, Jacob and Ayanna shared a moment of understanding so profound it needed no words. Their bond had grown not through passion, but through trust, not through dramatic confessions, but through shared responsibility and respect for something larger than themselves. The relic rested safely between them, a silent guardian of the past and a bridge to the future. And Jacob knew that while tests had been met, the story was far from over. There were more challenges ahead, moral, spiritual, and perhaps even physical. Yet he felt a steady confidence he had never known. The land, the elders, Ayanna, and the relic had shown him a path forward, and he was determined to walk it with integrity. The wind whispered through the grove once more, carrying with it the faint echo of ancestors, the rustle of leaves, and the sense that the story was unfolding as it should, slowly, patiently, beautifully. Jacob took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the land beneath him, the gentle warmth of Ayanna at his side, and the hum of the relic as if it were the heartbeat of time itself. The first trials had been met, courage had been shown, and bonds had deepened. Yet the plains beyond waited, holding promise, danger, and a climax yet unseen. Jacob knew that the true measure of his heart was yet to come, a final test where moral clarity, courage, and love would converge in a moment that could shape the future forever. And as the fire dwindled to embers and the stars burned bright above, he felt a calm certainty. The story was nearing its most important chapter, and he was ready to meet it, whatever it might demand. The dawn came slow over the plains, soft light spilling across the mesas and dusted fields, painting the homestead in hues of gold and amber. There was a hush to the morning, a quiet anticipation that seemed to press against Jacob's chest. Today was the day of the ritual, the day he would demonstrate that he had not only understood the relic, but had honored it with courage, humility, and the respect it demanded. Ayanna moved beside him, quiet and steady, her presence like the grounding roots of an ancient tree. The elders had gathered in the grove, their faces serene, yet carrying the weight of generations. Each step Jacob took toward the center of the circle felt deliberate, measured, and yet heavy with meaning. The relic lay before him on a simple cloth, its carvings catching the morning light, almost as if it had been waiting, patient and alive, for centuries for this very moment. Jacob knelt, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. His hands hovered over the relic, absorbing the hum that had become familiar, yet never ordinary. He whispered the words the elders had taught him, acknowledging the lives that had come before, offering his respect, and committing himself to the responsibility entrusted to him. The water from the river shimmered in his palms as he poured it carefully over the artifact, each drop a testament to humility, patience, and understanding. And then the world seemed to exhale. The wind rose in soft spirals, lifting dust and petals from the nearby sage and juniper. The carvings on the relic seemed to glow faintly, as if the memory of centuries pressed forward, acknowledging the sincerity of Jacob's heart. He closed his eyes, feeling the stories embedded in the wood. Ancestors' courage, their grief, their unwavering connection to the land. It was then that Harlan appeared again, his presence more menacing than before, eyes narrowed with greed and impatience. He had waited for this moment, thinking that the ceremony would distract Jacob, that the relic's power was only in myth. Jacob rose slowly, the calm in his chest stronger than the fear creeping at his edges. Ayanna stepped beside him, a quiet shield, her gaze unwavering. Harlan lunged, but Jacob did not flinch. He stood with the certainty of someone who had seen the weight of generations, someone who understood that strength was measured in courage, respect, and moral clarity, not brute force. The moment stretched, taut, and suspended. Harlan's anger burned, but he found no path through Jacob's resolve, no leverage against the quiet authority of the elders or the invisible presence of those who had come before. He stumbled back, frustration twisting his face. In that instant, the wind lifted a loose branch, sending it tumbling between them, an almost supernatural reminder that the land itself observed and judged the intent of men. Jacob spoke, voice calm, steady, and unwavering. It is not yours to take, and no greed can claim what is held by honor. Ayanna's hand hovered over the relic, though she did not touch it. Leave, she said softly. The land does not suffer those who understand, but it does not forgive those who take without respect. Harlan glared, realizing that his schemes had been undone not by strength, but by integrity. With a final snarl, he retreated, swallowed by the grove and dust, leaving Jacob and the elders in silence once more. The ritual continued. Jacob knelt, placing his hands upon the relic, feeling a gentle warmth emanate from it, as if it recognized not just his physical presence, but the honesty and intent in his heart. The elders chanted softly, their voices weaving through the morning light like a prayer carried on the wind. Jacob followed the rhythm, allowing each movement to be guided by reverence, patience, and trust. Ayanna watched him with quiet awe. "You have learned to listen," she whispered, "not just to the relic, but to the land and to yourself." Jacob's chest tightened with emotion. "It is more than I ever imagined," he admitted. "I feel alive in a way I never have." Connected. The elder woman, silver-haired and luminous in the early light, stepped forward. Her gaze settled on Jacob, piercing yet kind. "You have honored what was entrusted to you," she said. "The relic will return to our people, and the story continues, because you have chosen to carry it with respect. The moment was still. The relic shimmered faintly, a bridge between past and present, between human hearts and the eternal pulse of the land. Jacob felt the culmination of his trials: courage, humility, patience, and understanding converge in this quiet but profound instant. And then the wind rose, stronger now, circling around the grove, lifting dust and sage, carrying with it whispers of 1,000 voices. Jacob felt them pressing close, the ancestors, the land, Ayanna, and the elders, all witnesses to a heart that had passed the test. It was a thrill unlike any he had known, not of fear or excitement, but of a deep, resonant fulfillment. Ayanna stepped forward, placing her hand lightly on his shoulder. The gesture was small, tender, but it carried the weight of all they had shared: trust, understanding, and the subtle blossoming of love. Jacob felt a warmth he could not name, a quiet certainty that the bond between them had deepened into something enduring, though unspoken. The relic was carefully lifted by the elders and carried back toward the sacred space of their community. Jacob and Ayanna followed, the plains stretching endlessly around them, golden in the morning sun. The journey was quiet, reflective, a procession of reverence, where each step felt like a heartbeat echoing through centuries. Harlan did not return. The lesson had been clear: not through punishment, but through integrity, humility, and the quiet power of moral courage. The man's greed would find no purchase here, and the story would remain whole, unbroken. The ceremony concluded with a soft chant, rising and falling like the wind over the mesas. Jacob knelt one last time, whispering a vow to honor the land, to protect its stories, and to walk the world with the awareness and kindness he had cultivated through this journey. Ayanna knelt beside him, not in formality, but in quiet solidarity, a companion in purpose and heart. As the sun climbed higher, casting long, golden shadows, Jacob finally allowed himself to stand fully, feeling the pulse of the plains beneath his boots, the weight of generations upon his shoulders, and the gentle warmth of Ayanna at his side. For the first time, he felt fully present, fully alive, fully connected to a story that spanned centuries. They returned to the homestead together, the wind carrying with it the faint scent of sage, earth, and distant rain. Jacob paused at the doorway, glancing back at the grove where the ritual had taken place. A sense of peace settled over him, profound and unshakable. The land had spoken. He had listened. And in that listening, he had discovered not only courage, but the depth of his own heart. Ayanna smiled beside him, eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "The story continues," she said softly. "Not just here, not just now, but through every choice you make from this moment forward." Jacob nodded, understanding that the journey had not ended, only transformed. He felt the pulse of the land beneath his feet, the hum of the relic carried in memory, and the quiet strength of companionship beside him. For the first time, he knew what it meant to honor a story fully, with integrity, humility, courage, and love. As twilight fell, the homestead was bathed in soft amber light. Jacob and Ayanna sat on the porch, shoulders touching lightly, watching the horizon where the plains met the sky. The wind stirred gently, carrying whispers of the past and promises of the future. Jacob felt a deep, resonant calm, a knowing that he had passed the test of the relic, of the land, and of his own heart. The story had reached its climax not with violence or triumph, but with understanding and connection. The thrill was not of danger, but of realization, that courage and moral clarity, when paired with patience and empathy, could shape destinies and heal hearts. And in that quiet moment, Jacob turned to the audience of this story, the invisible witnesses beyond the pages, beyond the plains. He would speak if he could. Cherish the land that holds you. Honor the stories that came before. Let courage be measured in kindness and strength in humility. And remember, even in the quietest moments, choices echo across generations. If this story touched your heart, share it. Tell us where you are watching from, And let the pulse of stories like these remind us that we are all connected. The wind whispered once more, carrying the distant cry of a hawk, the rustle of leaves, and the sense that the story would continue, carried in memory, in choice, and in the quiet courage of hearts willing to listen. Jacob and Ayanna watched the stars begin to scatter across the sky, a gentle promise of continuity, love, and understanding. And with that, the plains were still, the relics safe, and the homestead bathed in the soft light of completion. A story fulfilled, a heart changed, and a world slightly wiser for having listened.